Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm so glad to see you guys tuned in this afternoon. Thank you for spending your Saturday afternoon with us, trying to learn more about what this recession means, especially to the job market. So, again, I am Deirdre. I am the founder of Liyab. So, since you're all in this group, you already know that Liyab is an e learning startup that's really focused on helping you guys, specifically Gen Z Filipinos, transition into working life better. And I think, given the extreme or extraordinary circumstances that we are in now, it's now more than ever that we all need some guidance on how to navigate this new job market. So while we're still waiting for the rest to tune into our live, give them a bit of time to tune in. Some of you are notified already. If you have some friends who you think might be interested in this topic or who would benefit from learning more about this topic, please invite them to the group. So our settings in the group is if a friend is already in the group, they don't need to get approval anymore. So you can just go ahead and do that now, and invite your friends who would possibly benefit from this topic. So while we're waiting again for the rest, maybe we can use some of the reactions that we have on Facebook to let me know how you guys are doing this afternoon. Again, like, are you okay? Are you loving this Saturday? Sort of like, wow, it's such a beautiful day. Let us know through the reactions on Facebook right now while we're waiting for the rest. And our usual reminders for our Facebook Live sessions, because this is live, and what's beautiful about this is we can see your comments. So if you have any questions at all regarding our topic, or if you have some questions for Peter, our guest, who I will be introducing in a bit, please comment them anytime on our Facebook Live, and I will be reading them later once we have time for more questions. Because I've already read some of the questions that we discussed through this group. And those are the questions that I will be asking first. And I think those are brilliant questions. So thank you to the members who contributed the questions for our session today. So maybe we are able to start. We have I guess enough people in the group for those who will not be able to catch the rest of or start this live with us. It will be posted in our group of, well, forever, or hopefully until as long as Facebook still exists, it's still gonna be in the group. So you, even after today's live, if you find it very useful, you can invite more friends, and then they can just watch the live video again after. All right. So we'll be starting now. This afternoon, we are joined by Peter Cauton. Now, Peter has been, I think, and this is usually how I introduce him first. He's been in the HR industry for 2 decades now, and which
Oh
is
man,
why I'm sorry if it ages you, Peter.
it's fine.
But yeah, so Peter has been in the HR industry for 2 decades now, and he has seen how many generations already of workers go in and out of the workforce and in and out of the job market. Uh,
In and
and
out. That means I've seen the retirement. Di naman.
yeah, well, because your bosses from
Okay,
before,
but
right?
could
Right.
be. Okay.
So that's part of it. But also, Peter is the founder of several startups, most of which are in the future of work fields. So one of them is Storm Technologies. It's the country's leading flexible benefits provider, and they have clients from a lot of different industries, local and international companies. So Peter has been exposed to HR directors also and HR professionals from the different clients that his startups have. So Peter is the founder of Storm Technologies and also an e-learning company called Bihasa. So with that, also he's been working with not just companies now, but also freelancers, which I think is great because now he's able to give us perspectives from different segments of the job market, and not just from let's say like a corporate standpoint, but also from a startup standpoint, and even the self-employed perspective he is able to provide. So that's why I think he is the perfect person to discuss this. And as I've mentioned before, Peter has also gone through how many recessions or financial crisis already. When I chatted with him about today's topic, he mentioned to me that he actually joined the market the job market back in 1997 when we were undergoing through the Asian financial crisis, and then quit his corporate HR job to start his own startup back in the 2008 financial crisis. And then now with a couple of new projects for him, and then we're facing the 2020 financial crisis. So maybe Peter, you can say hi first before we go ahead to our Q&A.
Hello, Deirdre. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to share thoughts and advice on what to do in the job market when a recession happens. As you mentioned, it seems to me that whenever I am in some sort of a career crossroad, it is always in the midst of a financial crisis. So I've had my share of experiences with recessions and trying to really navigate through them. So again, thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to this discussion.
Awesome. So we'll go right ahead, actually. And for those who aren't so familiar yet with what a recession or a financial crisis is, maybe you can give us a bit of an introduction or explanation to what a recession is.
Yeah. So actually, if you look at the economic histories of countries or the global economy, it would seem to come in cycles. So you have what you call the economic cycle. It's a cycle. So if you've heard of the terms boom and bust cycle, so these are the peaks and the troughs of the cycle. So the boom or when the markets are in bull mode is when there is a lot of economic activity, there is a lot of money being invested, there is a lot of money to go around, there are a lot of jobs. But the opposite of that is when you are in the bust side of a cycle. And this is when you have generally an economic slowdown. There is less economic activity resulting in less money for everyone, lesser jobs, etc. So the past two recessions I've been through were largely caused by economic and policies. And the first one, the Asian financial crisis in '97, started in Thailand. Their currency fell and it affected the entire region. The second one started in the States. They had not so good policies in housing. It created a recession in the States, which affected mostly all countries around the world. These were caused by largely economic policies and then movements. Now is a bit different because it's caused by a pandemic. So there is a bit of a difference, and there is a bit of also a bit of the unknown. We still don't know a lot about this virus. We still don't know about how it'll resolve itself or if it will resolve itself. So there's still a lot of unknowns. So this is a bit different from the others, but as far as it causing a recession is concerned, we're seeing what I saw before in the first two recessions I went through, wherein we see loss of jobs, companies laying off people, companies pausing hiring. So, and it is a difficult period for job seekers.
Would you say that this 2020 financial crisis that we are facing now would be worse than any of the previous ones? Because when I was reading through the IMF's statement on it, they said it could be as bad or even worse than the 2008 financial crisis. So I was wondering, given that this is such a global scale, like the previous ones were sort of like a domino effect, starting from one economy and affecting the rest. But I think this one is different because it's all at the same time. Everyone is so affected, and it's not going to be a ripple effect anymore, is it?
So we still don't know. We are still maybe 1 or 2 months within the economic recession started by the virus. So in the States, it's really only now that they're feeling the effects of unemployment. So if you look at their figures, it's staggering. It's 6 million Americans filing for unemployment. So the graph that I saw on the television was incredible. It's flat. And then suddenly almost vertically shoots up to 6 million. So that is historic. So, and the way it feels, do you agree? So, I think before in the recessions, we would get announcements of companies laying off hundreds, thousands of people, but you see activity still ongoing. You could go to the mall and like see people buying stuff in restaurants. So you can still see economic activity. There's still job fairs happening during that time, but now it's different. You go outside, it's deserted. The malls are all closed. There is a lot of unknowns. A lot of the people, when you ask them, when you ask the leaders what will happen, they don't know, and that sort of environment, I think, will make you look at your cash and say, I want to hang on to this first because I don't know what's going to happen. That means people or companies are not investing in, hey, I want to create this job because I want to invest in this sort of project, so I want more people to work on it. That sort of activity will lessen because there is a lot of fear and a lot of the unknown. So from a feeling perspective, and even the numbers that we're seeing, it seems to me that this might be a bit worse than the last two. But we would really only know down the line. Because, for example, if a vaccine is suddenly pops out, that would change things dramatically. Because suddenly there will be no fear of going out, and then resuming a lot of the activities that we normally do. But unless there's something dramatic like that, and from a lot of the from the news, it'll take a year and a half for us to be able to come up with a vaccine. Then again, a lot of unknowns.
I think at this point, even it's so hard to see what's gonna happen next. Companies even are constantly recalibrating their targets, which I know could affect the hiring. But I think
Yeah.
I've been just thinking about it from a perspective of, it's an effect of the lockdown, but not in terms of like this has a grander effect on the economy. And with companies recalibrating targets, actually, it's not all bad. Like, for example, I know some companies who have stopped production, change targets to become lower. But I think for some companies who are, I hate to use this word, benefiting from what's happening now that everyone's staying at home, I think they've recalibrated targets to be a bit higher even. So my question then would be: are there first maybe sectors or industries that would um, benefit from the recession before we go ahead and talk about what companies would remain the same and what companies would be impacted the hardest?
So one word I think we'll be using a lot in this discussion is the word essential, right? So you are now seeing in our homes right now, what are the items that you still buy and the services that you still use? Right now, we are using Zoom and Facebook. If you can get a job in Zoom and Facebook, those are probably very safe jobs. Companies like Zoom, and there are a number of them, GoToMeeting, Demio, are probably making a bit of money from this. Essential groceries. I went to the grocery the other day, no bread. So all the bread companies are probably making a killing. But the problem for them is actually production. They
Yeah.
can't meet demand because their employees are not going to work. So this downturn, this lockdown rather, is really affecting that. So it's not as black and white and predictable as it seems. So obviously digital uh, stuff that you can do from your house, and so those sort of services and products, I would really take a hard look at. A lot of companies now. So I belong to a lot of like entrepreneur groups and CEO groups. So a lot of them are saying, or you would see a lot of activity of them really taking leaps as far as going digital is concerned, because there's no choice now and they see it. They know that after the lockdown, reality or the status quo would be a bit different. and they need to rely on revenue streams which are determined and are purely digital revenue streams. So that is looking at those industries and those companies, and then really trying to think, okay, if these are my skills, these are my abilities as an individual, how do these translate in the online world? Because most white collar jobs have sort of translations or equivalents in the digital environment. I would really take a hard look at those. And there's going to be you need to be able to, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later. You need to be able to stand out because there are probably a lot of people applying to those jobs right now.
Can you give me an example of something that, like a job that is primarily physical, but you can imagine it having an online, I guess, equivalent of it?
Sales, no. So so actually here, so Bihasa is a digital sort of enabler. We in Bihasa, we help companies and individuals and brands create online learning platforms. So before, when I would go and sell the company or the service, I would have a meeting with someone face to face physically, right? All those meetings are now done over Zoom. So so this is actually a huge change because typically that's a face to face meeting, almost always, and I would insist on it. You want to see the body language. You want to, as a someone who sells, you want eye contact, etc. But now it's completely different. So that's a translation from before. I, as a salesperson, as someone who represents your company, would go around. Now it's done completely from my this room actually. So and then there are all sorts of equivalents, right? So training. If you're a trainer, you're a teacher, then they would have online equivalents as well. So there.
So I guess what you're saying is it's possible that for let's say functions that
Mhm.
are done physically but have an online equivalent, maybe it's more or less going to be unchanged, right? Like it's not going to be affected that much. But how about sectors, well, maybe industries or functions even that would be hit the hardest with this?
Yeah. So services, obviously. So restaurants, you can't go to the movie houses anymore, the malls. The service industry is hardly hit. Non-essential retail, you won't buy a T-shirt nowadays. You won't buy a car. You want to be able to save money. These industries will be really hard hit over the next few months, and it usually will have a ripple effect. If one industry is really greatly affected, then it does have some ripple effect or some effect towards the other industries. But those any, again, if it's non-essential, if it requires people meeting physically, then you can expect that sort of industry to be hard to get. One industry that I've had a lot of talks with is the training industry. So you can imagine how that industry is really hard hit. So their business would be composed of doing classroom type training for individuals or employees of a company. Overnight, in a week, I had calls from friends in that industry asking for help or just lamenting at how they lost millions of projects, millions of pesos worth of projects in 2 or 3 days. So those are all trying to find now what's the online equivalent of what I'm doing. How can I sell it? If once the lockdown happens, then what does my business look like? Uh, so those industries very much affected by this.
I think what's a good guiding principle is exactly what you mentioned earlier, is what is non-essential is usually going to get hit. So for example, I've seen a lot of people from the events industries, and not just like corporate events, but also like even weddings. And then weddings are
Yeah,
itself like
yeah,
is a
yeah.
huge industry. Photographers, videographers, caterers have a lot of cancellations in the past month. So I think those especially. But do you think that, for example, after this lockdown and just purely basing from like a recession standpoint alone, would you think in some industries would be able to recover faster than others?
I think that question boils down how fast a company embraces digital. If you're able to embrace digital and create revenue streams that are digital as a company, and they know this because I've seen all these things being discussed by CEOs and company owners. That's the directive. Look at digital, conserve cash. Once the economy shows signs of recovering, then you go hard at the market, etc. And that will create some jobs, I think. No? So those companies, not necessarily those companies who are traditional companies, now having no choice because they have a gun to their head. Hey, you go digital or die. And this has actually been in the market the past 10, 15 years, but there's some really laggards in the industry who are really very stubborn. They now have a gun to their heads because they're not making anything. So those will probably invest in exploring digital sort of revenue streams. Those are the companies which might be able to create jobs over the next few months. I do expect, Deirdre, and this is a bit of a tangent already, that also over the next few months, we will have, right now, if you look at the HR forums and what they're talking about, I've talked to some HR friends, they're all in panic mode, crisis mode. How do we transition to completely online? That's a huge HR problem now. How do we keep business operations and have key people at home? So they're still in crisis. How does this affect us? How do we conserve money? CEOs are still trying to outline strategies. They're waiting as to how this happens if the lockdown ends mid-April. So they're still not at the let's go hire, let's go. What's the decision? What to hire? So I do think that maybe June, July, that's when you'd see a bit more openings also happening, especially if the lockdown already ceases. Then there should be a bit more jobs. But the other side of that is there also, I expect, would be a lot of small, medium companies closing down because they can't take this hit of 6 months no revenue. And most SMEs don't have that sort of financial, they don't have a war chest that typically the bigger companies would have that can last this out. Those guys probably close down. So, but the small, medium enterprises who are digital, those guys probably also are looking for 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 people.
My I think from that also we might be seeing a lot of layoffs as
Yes.
well. I think even because I had the thought when you were mentioning that companies will, even the traditional ones, will have to try to figure out how to do things digitally. And from what I've seen, working with companies who do shift digitally,
Mhm.
is shifting digitally also means that they get to, I guess, get rid of operations or processes that do require a lot of people or
Yeah.
manual labor. So even then, I think even just the shift to digital could mean a lot of layoffs as well. Do you have
Yeah.
any thoughts on that
There
specifically?
will be
Like
layoffs for
which
sure.
functions could be in danger of seeing a lot of layoffs?
We go back to essential, non-essential, right? So for those who are actually asking, will the HR person I'm talking to get back to me on my job application? The HR person you're talking to is probably thinking whether she'll be losing her job or not because HR is typically seen as a cost center. You don't make revenue for your firm. So so it's from it depends again on the leadership team looking at it, but they could see HR as a cost center and cut down, or tell you, and this I really saw in the recession. Okay, there are 20 people in HR. We'll just retain three. You three, you handle the work of 20 people, and you won't get a job increase. And they will try to rise up to that because they have no choice. So that's you now need to think, right? So what's essential now for the population? And then what are the most essential positions in these companies which are essential? And those are the jobs you can try, or the industries you can really try to penetrate.
I think one way to figure that out now, even with like which roles are essential and are non-essential, because I think a lot of companies are on a skeletal workforce already. So
Already.
you can also sort of see like, hey, if you're on the skeletal workforce, you are a bit more secure with your job versus the ones that are like, hey, take a bit of time off. You're allowed not to go to the office, and I think
Yeah.
that could possibly be a signal of whether your company finds your job essential to day-to-day operations. So
Yeah.
that could be a hint, right?
Yeah.
I guess for job seekers now, what
Mhm.
aside from seeing that the HR people you're talking to might reply to you slower because they're all also
They
already
might not be
concerned.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're already concerned about their own jobs. What do you
Mhm.
think are the other effects on job seekers now of this recession?
One huge thing I'm seeing is that, and I think we talked about this, Deirdre. It's a very good time to hire. If you're an employer, you want to hire. So because suddenly the job market is now a demand market. It's the past decade, 15 years. It's always been a supply market. What do I mean? So before, companies would really spend a ton of money on recruitment because they want to attract. They know that they have to make sure that their branding is great. The people on recruiting, other the people in recruitment are great people. They spend a lot on being present in job fairs, and they have their own like activities going on to attract you. Now they know if I have a job, I would have 200 people applying to it, and those are probably good profiles because suddenly there are fewer positions, and more people trying to attract more people trying to get into these jobs. So suddenly the power now goes back to the demand side. So what does this mean for the job seeker? You have to now be able to stand out even more so and work on your recruitment process, your application process, even more than before. So, for example, one as a recruiter, so I've also been in recruitment. I've been in recruitment for a long 20 years. So, um, one of the things I know already when I see an application form, even at that level of I'm looking at the resume, I know if this is someone's doing the shotgun effect. There's some shotgun sort of strategy wherein, okay, these are all the companies I'm finding on this job board. I will apply to all of them. Email, 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 email. So job objective to get a great job, something like that, and then very generic, right? On the other hand, I do appreciate someone whom I know has taken the time to research about my company, about me, the interviewer, and then is very thoughtful when it comes to the cover letter, when it comes to adding me on LinkedIn and then thanking me and then saying that, hey, I'm looking forward to really meeting you maybe in person during the job interview process, etc. So you can see the thought and care that this person is showing and giving, applying to my firm. That makes a difference. So, because right now I think there's a lot of fear, and the tendency is, oh my gosh, I'm going to apply to all of these companies because I want to make sure I land. I think the counterintuitive piece of advice is to stop that. All the more that you have to be laser like because you have to stand out. And the only way you can stand out is if you really take time. Who is the person I'm talking to? What is this company about? How can I show this particular company applying to this particular position that I can provide value now? Because when we talk about essential and non-essential in a company, ultimately it boils down to, can this person make me money? So, and that's it. If this person cannot make me money, or it'll take 6 months of training this person to make money, then I'd rather not hire, because I don't have the budget. I want to make sure that I have a directive to keep my cash liquid. Um, so uh, what do you call this? So you got to be able to hustle and work and really focus and try to see how you can help that firm. If you don't have that sort of experience yet, then you got to be able to acquire that experience, and it might be a good time. I remember in the 2000, in the 97, 98 crisis. So 97, I decided to become a teacher in my alma mater high school. And then the recession happened in the middle of 97. I got a job as a teacher. When I graduated when I finished my 1 year stint as a teacher in 98, the recession was still going on. But I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in I wanted to go in HR, because after a year of teaching, I thought I want to go to the job function which is most closely related to teaching as possible, and I identified that as HR. So I hunkered down and I thought, okay, how can I? Well, one, I researched which HR jobs were open in what particular industry. And then I customized every resume to the opening and the position. I networked with the upperclassmen I knew from 1 to 3 years that I knew them from college, and I checked who was in HR. And then that's where I got a job during that recession. It was from my friend who was 2 years my senior, who was HR manager for this IT company called Indra, and they're still here now. And that was how I got my first HR job, because of that particular focus. And I think that sort of focus really will help job seekers right now.
I think you gave a lot of good advice, and in particular, I really like how you mentioned that part of it is really like the companies are looking for someone who adds value now, and not someone that they have to train. Because I think before this recession started, companies were more comfortable taking time hiring someone who was more trainable, because like, if it's okay if they didn't have the skills outright, because that means, it's okay, we have time to train them. But
Yes.
now it's so much different, because they do not have time to train them, they don't have the resources. I doubt the trainers are also available to think about it now. So I think that's a major shift from, because like all of the advice, I think, relevant whether we're in a recession or not. But I think that particular one about having skills that could benefit the company
Yeah.
from day one is a big difference from
Yeah.
before. So good that that's something you mentioned. I think not a lot of people think about that, especially fresh grads. I think because they think, you know what, they have the budget, they're gonna train me,
Mm.
but not anymore now in this situation. So thank
I
you.
go I go back to that. Sorry, just to add,
Go ahead.
and we were talking about this before the feed started, but a lot of the jobs we like as a fresh graduate would be those apprentice jobs, right? If you look at all the openings typically available for a fresh graduate, yes, there are the BPO customer service representative, teller, cashier, but the jobs you really want are apprentice positions. Typically with the word junior or associate or assistant attached to it. Assistant brand manager, associate product manager, junior programmer. Those jobs are there, and they involve you apprenticing with someone. So you are an assistant to a full-blown product manager. You are an assistant to a head developer. And your job is to help them with their job. and their job is to train you. For example, in IT, it's a given. If I hire a fresh graduate programmer, I know that it'll take a year for this programmer to actually contribute, and I know that I need to train him for a year before he really can understand the structure we're trying to build, get a hang of the code, etc. But that's a necessary sort of sacrifice for me because if I want to get talent, I want to get them from the graduation level and just hook them up to my culture and then grow them. So there is an advantage there. But I know it's a year, but now that's a luxury now. Again, you think about essential, non-essential. These jobs again are created when the person, the manager has too much work. Hey, I have too much work. I need an assistant. Hey, I have too much work. I need a junior programmer. And they send out a job. What do you call this? Hey, HR, I need a job. It gets approved by the CFO, the CEO. I need one or two people. So when they file that now, they're gonna be rejected because no one wants to have that financial promise of paying someone. At the very least, they would probably say, okay, we'll get a person, but can it be a 3-month project hire? How long will you need? How long will you need this person for? Then maybe we can use a freelancer first. So those jobs will probably lessen. And then if you want to still fight for those, you got to be able to think, how can I contribute to the company now? So you have to have proof. And that means you need maybe a bit of experience in your resume to stand out. How do you get that? You get freelance jobs and maybe do it for free first. And I've seen people do this. For example, go to startup.ph and to say, hey, I'm an artist. Here's my portfolio. I'm going to do things for free and post it on a Facebook group with a lot of the people they're targeting. Where they hang out, you are going to get 30, 40, 50 people if you show like a good portfolio. And you're doing it for experience. You got to suck it up, right? So, and then when you have maybe 2 or 3 things, and that's going to make you stand out. If you have those, then when you apply, then they can see this guy can help me make money. Then it's less of, there's less friction for them to make that decision to hire you or give you a freelance job. But again, this entails hustle and patience. I remember when in that 98 year, I finished my teaching work March. I knew it would take time to get a job. So that was the mindset. I didn't allow myself to get disappointed when people weren't replying because I knew that was the market. I landed my job in July, March, April, May, June, 5 months after I first entered the job market. So it might take that long or even longer in today's climate.
Okay. So thanks for pointing that out. That with this recession, we will expect a longer turnaround time or longer placement time when we're going to apply to companies. But I love that we're already in the topic of freelancing because I actually posted that question in our thread last night, where I wanted to ask, like, is there going to be a very significant shift for companies to tap into freelancers more than employees? Because like this is in my mind, it's like more of like, going for the variable costs more than the fixed cost of paying someone every month permanently versus like just for whenever they need something done.
Definitely. So and you just mentioned the primary reason why it's not a monthly promise. If I hire someone, then I am promising to pay that person forever with yearly salary increases until the person is fired or resigns. But with a freelancer, you get you get the person on a project basis, and it's a lot safer as far as cash out is concerned. So that is definitely something. Freelancers, I do know that market has also shrunk, obviously, right? So if industries who hire programmers or rather freelancers before are now in lockdown, then they wouldn't be able to hire. So it has an effect. But there is a large number. I mean, a lot of people are going digital. There are a lot of digital freelance opportunities, and those I think will will remain, or those you will always be in demand if you can do great work. For example, you're a great copywriter. You're a great artist. You can launch a digital campaign and you have proof points. Then that's actually a way to to recession proof your career. You will always be in demand if you have that sort of skill, and then you're used to the freelancing sort of universe. Then that's a way really of uh, creating some sort of a shield.
All right. How about so my question now is more for people who are already in the process of applying to companies. So before this lockdown happened, they probably got into the first stage already, did their interview. Um, I know that there's a lot of anxiety behind it, and part of it is like they're asking if it's possible that companies will take back like their openings. Like this is a previous opening, it's not open
Yeah,
anymore. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
for sure.
what.
There are some employees taking back their resignations.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
that's also been a trend. Hey, I resigned. Ah, maybe I'm not resigning anymore. So immediately those job openings for those positions are probably not going to
Ah,
be open anymore, and companies would much rather keep the person they know could do the work rather than trust a new person to do it. So yes, we should anticipate that.
I think another thing that we've been encountering a lot is because I've chatted with a bit of people also. They said like they're currently in a freeze hire, and that means like they're not hiring anyone for that particular moment. Now, my question is for to represent people who've been told that they're on a freeze hire, so they're not hiring anymore. Should we wait out for companies to unfreeze their hiring, or should we take that as a signal already to like, okay, maybe I should apply to someone else and not wait for this company to unfreeze their hiring?
I think one word aside from essential, non-essential, that we also would need to sort of embody over the next few months is flexibility.
Mm.
So you have to have a flexible sort of mindset. Otherwise, it might be extremely disappointing. You can't say this is my dream company. It's only this company or bust. What if they're not hiring? What if they won't hire until next year? um, uh, you gotta have an open mind. Even looking at different industries. Of course, the really important thing is to find a job that would really make use of your gifts and your purpose and your talent, regardless of the position or the economic compensation, right? So obviously that takes precedence, but that sort you can apply that now maybe across different industries instead of before I was just looking at one industry. For example, the medical industry is probably hiring, right? They are hiring. If you
They
want to
are
be a medical
hiring.
frontliner, then 500 bucks a day, which yeah, they're up in arms now because anyway, the medical industry is probably hiring. So if you had your mind, let's say, in a marketing sort of job before, you might want to try it out in that industry. And when I say medical industry, it's not just hospitals, right? So that's a broad sort of spectrum of different companies like HMOs, the hospitals, the clinics you see in the malls, nursing staffing, nursing schools, sort of nursing. Filipino nurses are now super in demand. The states in the United States, they're actively campaigning to get Filipino nurses. There's an entire engine around that. So you could be if you want to be a recruiter, you can be like a recruiter in that space. So it might be good to like see it from a cross industry, cross job, cross company perspective. the more flexible we are, the better. But again, you have to marry this with the sort of focus. Never do it shotgun. The company needs to feel that you are serious with your application to them because you need to stand out.
I love that you put it again of in the context of what we're in now of COVID-19. I think I just wanted to add that when you gave the example of if you're looking for experience and you want to freelance, one good way to do that is to volunteer for the
Yeah,
lot of different like initiatives right now by both private and public
yeah,
organizations. You can use your skills and not just in like graphic design or copywriting or communication, but even just like arranging logistics from your house, or even like fundraising. Those are still skills that you can do while you're at home and for a good cause. And I think that also makes you more valuable
yeah,
later on when you go job hunting, because now it looks like, hey, you weren't just like trying to look for any kind of job, but you were also trying to contribute to the situation right now. So that's also a
yeah.
really nice idea
Definitely,
in the context of
definitely,
what's happening now. All right.
definitely. I think it's a
I
great point.
I just have one final question before we go into checking our Facebook Live for more questions that I wasn't able to
Hmm.
ask. So again, guys, while we're in the process of discussing this question, you can just go ahead and comment now your questions on Facebook Live so I can read them after Peter addresses this final question. So my final question is, and I love that all throughout this afternoon, you've discussed a lot of different strategies for how I guess to be flexible and adapt to the situations we're in now. But do you have any more advice for job seekers now on how they can adjust their strategy in job hunting, aside from being very specific about the companies that they want to apply to, really focusing on how to stand out, showing some proof that they can be valuable or add value from day one. What other strategies would you have for the job seekers now?
I think mindset is very important. So you have to play the long game. You have to understand that there aren't a lot of companies hiring. There's going to be a multiplication of the number of jobs, of the number of candidates applying to a certain job. You might get rejected. Mental health, I think, is crucial here. We're all cooped up in our houses in isolation, thinking about different things. And I think when we get those rejection letters, sometimes you can't help but associate it with your self worth. That's something that we have to combat. Doesn't matter if you get rejected 20 companies. That's really the situation now. You just gotta grind and hustle. So I think having that proper mindset that it's going to be difficult. Um, it's but you can also enjoy the experience, right? For example, as you try to build your competencies, your skills, and do maybe freelance jobs for free, that can be something that's fun and you can learn a lot from. In fact, I recommend that. Even if you set your mind already, hey, I want this corporate job, try to get some writing gig, some quick programming gig on the side, and I guarantee you will learn so much. And that experience will help you in whatever situation you get down the line. And it might be the best sort of opportunity to do that now. So, how do you now acquire? How can you be better? How can you evolve yourself and learn and then be a better person, a better employee, a better all around sort of an individual? You can use that now. Read books, but that grit of every day, you gotta get to work. It's so actually tempting now to just plop yourself in front of the PlayStation and then just go Netflix away the day, right? So you have to stop that, and then you gotta grind. And then again, that perspective of contribute immediate contribution. How can I be an essential versus a non-essential? You have to now be able to bake that in the different parts of the application process, which incidentally will probably be all digital in some cases. Um, uh, and then try to network. I think networking, talk to your upperclassmen, the upperclassmen you know. and then try to get as many leads as you can. If you get an endorsement from someone inside the company, that's a larger sort of chance that you can get into that company versus a pure cold application. What else? So uh, those are on the top of my mind right.
All right. Thank you so much, Peter, for this discussion. I learned so much, especially with how different I guess the job market is gonna be after. I mean, actually during or right now the lockdown and even after. Um, Again, guys, if you have more questions for Peter, so we just have about 10 minutes left for this Facebook Live. So if you have questions for him regarding, hiring, job hunting, this recession, or even his experiences before, like, in the previous two recessions that he's been through, you can just put it in the Facebook Live. So I'm checking the comment section now. There are no questions so far, but I would really appreciate it if you guys take this time to ask him some of your questions. So I'm just watching out for questions now. I'm not sure if my feed just isn't updating. Um, but I see one of the participants said that he felt sort of attacked by what you said about people rescinding their resignation or taking back their resignation because of job security now. Um, and I do think that's a very common occurrence now. Okay, so while we're waiting for questions, maybe Peter, if you have more, like, maybe a message for some of our learners here, that's outside of job
One
hunting, if
thing,
you want.
so there, I think the one challenge is to really combat that fear. One sort of, I do remember that feeling of, hey, it's done, the recession's done, and it didn't take that long, um, uh, uh, and this will pass. So I remember when I graduated and it was a recession, and I felt, wow, how lucky am I na to be able to be in the 97 batch in the middle of the recession. And then I was thinking my career is doomed. That's I will never be able to get a job, and I think there's a tendency to overblow our problems sometimes, or the situation we're facing. But it will pass, and I think we're a very resilient sort of country, and even in those two recessions, we weren't as hard hit as some of our neighbors were, for different purposes, different reasons. And to not lose that confidence and hope, that we can go through this. But yun, if I think that hustle and that sort of grit will go a long way for us to get the ideal job, which is still possible in this time.
Thank you for that, Peter. I think what's really good is, like, we still keep a positive outlook, and not think that whatever we're in now is permanent and that's gonna be like this forever. But we do have some questions coming in now, so great. We have one from P4, and it's his question is it a wise idea to switch industries now?
So I'm assuming this, Patricia, that you are already working in a particular industry. Is it wise to? So there are different components, and it's tough to shoot from the hip without really knowing context. For example, are you a breadwinner, right? So if you are a breadwinner, then you're not just thinking about your own needs, and self actualization. I want to get the best job possible, etc. But you're thinking about your family. So if that's the idea, then remaining in your job might be a better, trying to get that security first until at least we know, hey, there are signs that the economy is improving. The layoffs have the trend of layoffs has been going down. But if not, if it's I would recommend trying to switch in transition. Trying to soft switch is the ideal. Meaning, for example, you are in one particular industry, you can get a sideline freelance job in another industry to test it out, and for you to actually get experience. That's a great way to do that transition without really letting go of your current job. So that applies even to shifting careers. If you're really tired of the job in the bank, let's say, and you really want to write, the best piece of advice that I would give you is don't quit that bank job first, especially now, but you can write on the side. And then and then you will see it if you're really good at it and it's really a passion of yours and it shows and people really resonate, then you will start making money there. And then you can do that transition much easily without really letting go of your current staff.
I love that. Thank you for introducing the concept of soft switching. I think a lot of us are in the mindset that, hey, if I want to do a career shift, I have to commit fully, quit my job, shift to a different career. But I love the idea of soft switching. So thank you for mentioning that, Peter. We have another question here from Jan, which I think is a really good question as well.
Mm-hmm.
In your experience, will settling for a less than ideal job for financial security negatively affect you in the long run? So instead of, say, waiting for the ideal job you wanted before the recession hit, maybe it's now time to settle for a different job, but he's worried about whether it's going to affect his career in the long run.
Again, again, we asked, are you a breadwinner? Because if you're a breadwinner, then you need a job now, right? So I'm assuming you're not necessarily the main breadwinner. Well, settling for again, you can't play the a long wait game because the opportunities you may want in that particular industry may not really be available for a dozen reasons, right? So it might be good for you to settle on that, like a less ideal job for you. But look at it this way. You can learn so much from the job. Uh, so look at it. I really, my main, one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give someone graduating is to look at their career path as a learning sort of journey. Instead of thinking, hey, what do I earn from this? You try to think what can you learn from it, especially, and then you try to bump that with your overall career objective. What can you learn from it? So for one reason or another, it might not be an ideal job, but what can you learn from it? So as long as you're able to learn something significant and you're able to experience different things, increase your network, why not? Will it affect you because you look like a job hopper? One job, not really enough to. If you do that 5 consecutive years, jumping, then HR would think this is a job hopper. But if it's just 1 year, even 2 years, you're not going to be branded that, and it will boil down to really how you explain it. So, but what do you call this? So that's one paradigm with which you can really try to look at that. What you can learn from.
My 2 cents also on this is that I think it's also good that if it shows in your resume that you held a job during the recession, that means
Yeah.
you have skills that are essential during a recession. So that makes you, I think, after this, I don't think it's even gonna be negative. It's gonna have a negative effect on your application. On the contrary, I think it's gonna be positive because that means during this recession, you were still able to hold a job versus, some of your peers who weren't able to find a job. So I think if you have the chance to get hired, even if it's like less than ideal, that's still a good sign. So that's my 2 cents on it. So how about the rest? Do we have any more questions? Okay, awesome. So we don't have any more questions. That means I was able to ask all of the questions on everybody's mind. So great. Thank you so much, Peter, for
Thank you
for
so much for having
spending
me.
this afternoon with us. Just a final note for everyone who is still tuned in. Again, we have a thread in the Facebook group. If there are more topics that you want us to discuss, I am constantly looking for guests, resource speakers like Peter, to go join the group and talk about some pressing concerns for you guys, especially during this time, when there's so much anxiety around job hunting. So just keep those suggestions coming. Then we'll be seeing you again very soon for another webinar that we'll have after Holy Week. So there's that. Please stay tuned for that, and do share and participate in the group. If you have more questions for Peter after this, go ahead and ask them in the group, because I am not kicking Peter out of the group. He's just gonna be there.
Oh, thank
I'll
you.
be
Yeah.
available to answer your questions when he has time. So, and Peter, I do welcome you if you have any thoughts at all. If you find out like more information from your network about this recession, feel free to also share that with the group. We
Sure.
are a learning group and supportive group
Mhm.
after all.
Would love to. Thank you so
All right.
much.
So thank you guys, and we will see you next time. Thank you for tuning in.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Have a weekend.